We find ourselves at the intersection of Polk Street and West 11th Avenue in Eugene, Oregon. By all appearances, it does not seem all that special. Just another intersection like many thousands traversed every day in the continental U.S. So why are we even here? Over a century ago, this very intersection was the starting point of a trolley line that was once part of a grander scheme. A line composed of various ambitions and fueled by deep rivalries. At one point in time, you could travel from here all the way to Portland by rail without crossing over the Willamette River. The route would garner its own place in railroad lore, whose name has become synonymous with railroading in the Willamette Valley. This is the story of the West Side Branch. In the late 1800s, the Pacific Northwest was awash with activity as it began to be opened up by floods of settlers arriving from the east. Homesteads were becoming towns, and towns were forming into cities. Here in Oregon's Willamette Valley, the cause for such attraction was primarily twofold, one being the fertile valley floor, and the second was the direct access to the abundant virgin timberland that surrounded it. With the main center of commerce and export consolidating in the new city of Portland to the north, rail lines began to appear in order to ship out the vast wealth of the Willamette Valley to markets south and east. The West Side Branch, unsurprisingly, runs on the western side of the Willamette Valley, in the shadow of the coastal mountains. At its height, it was over 130 miles in length, from Union Station in Portland, Oregon, to just west of Eugene at the southern end of the Willamette Valley. The northern section of the West Side Branch would appear first built by the Oregon and California Railroad, reaching St. Joseph in 1872. From there, the line would be extended again under the name of the Western Oregon Railroad, as far south as Corvallis, arriving in 1880. The southern section between Corvallis and Eugene was the last part of the overall route to be built, and also saw the earliest closures. It is this southern section that we will begin our journey as we pursue the line northward to Portland. Between Portland and Eugene, the branch passes through many large towns such as Beaverton, Hillsborough, McMinnville, Independence, and Corvallis. Many branch lines would come to feed into the west side, such as the Willamina, Falls City, Airlie, Glenbrook, and Bell Fountain branches. Much of this secondary route has seen abandonment over the decades, but large sections of it still remain active under the operations of the Portland and Western Railroad, of which we will also explore. We begin our story in 1907, where the city of Eugene would see the reinstatement of trolley lines after a failed franchise 4 years prior. A man by the name of Alvador Welch headed the venture, forming the Eugene and Eastern Railway Company, developing 4 electrified trolley routes around the city. Within months, he would rename the company to the Portland, Eugene and Eastern Railway, or the PE&E for short. This name change encompassed Welch's grand vision to build an electric system that would cover the Willamette Valley and even extend as far south as San Francisco. Welch would begin expanding his empire in 1911 by buying the streetcar systems in Albany, Salem, and West Lynn. He would more importantly purchase the Corvallis and Alsea River Railway Company in the same year. This brings us back to why we are starting our film at the intersection of Polk Street and West 11th Avenue, which hosted the corner of one of the 4 trolley routes Welch had built in Eugene known as the College Crest Route. A sizable loop of over 6 miles that traversed Eugene's southwestern outskirts and College Hill. In the summer of 1912, a new trolley line would branch off from here, heading along West 11th Avenue as part of a connecting route to Welch's newly acquired railway. Today, you would never know this by looking, as no visible traces are left in the road surface. However, we can still follow the trolley line's path as we make our way west. The first mile is easy enough to follow as one travels down West 11th. At Wilson Street, the line leaves the road, heading northwest through today's commercial parks. In between the warehouses, some indicators of the line's presence can be made out. Crossing over Bailey Hill Road, the track bed profile stands out as it passes through Bertelson Nature Park. Here, the right-of-way has found new life as part of the Stewart Pond Disc Golf Course in the form of the 6th Fairway, appropriately named the Southern Pacific. Continuing with this alignment, we spot another segment lined with trees on the western side of the park. Next, we soon arrive at the rails of the Coos Bay branch, where Beltline Road crosses overhead. Here, the trolley line ends its journey, having brought us out of Eugene. As ordinary and uninteresting as this location would appear, the purpose of the trolley line coming here was indeed important, as this was the location of a junction where the southern end of the West Side branch terminated, joining the branch from Coos Bay at the timetabled location of transfer. As its name would suggest, this was where passengers would transfer off electric trolleys from Eugene and onto the steam-hauled services for Coos Bay or northward for destinations on the West Side branch. At exactly milepost 651.3, we begin our journey on the West Side branch proper. We proceed northwest, following the path of the line as it passes Green Hill Road, where it angles northward, passing the flagstop of Malabon. The path carries over Clear Lake Road, arriving in the town of Alvador, west of Eugene Airport, and onward to the locality of Cheshire. Heading out of transfer, much of the right-of-way has been obliterated due to the construction of housing, farming, and work done on the Fern Ridge to Green Hill water channel. Reaching Green Hill Road, we are able to pick up the line again, passing through a private field as we see it angling northward. From here, we traverse fields for 4 miles, as the line heads straight for the locality of Malabon. Once known as Clear Lake, this locality appears on early Southern Pacific timetables. The line passes to the east of the unincorporated community, and on the ground we can see the remnants of the right-of-way as it crosses over Bodenheimer Road. Today, this section serves as a private driveway near milepost 656. A little further on, and the line intersects Clear Lake Road, where its presence is more pronounced, having once been carried over on a shallow embankment that is still visible a century later. Continuing on, and rows of trees line our route as we enter the community of Alvador. Located near Fern Ridge Lake, Alvador was established in the early 1900s, receiving a post office in 1914. As you may suspect, the town was named after the very Alvador Welch that built the railroad through here. Though small, Alvador hosts a general store and library, along with a company that specializes in drying hazelnuts, locally referred to as Filberts. The line passes behind the local Lane County Fire Station in the center of town and crosses Alvador Road. As the line turns north, it passes the location where the small depot would have been located. Beyond Alvador, the line's path becomes broken once again. With the aid of maps, we are able to connect the dots of the lost route. Going north, the line parallels Alvador Road as it passes through fields, with the right-of-way visible, being used as a field boundary. 4 miles north of Alvador, the line disappears from view where it makes a turn to the northwest, near where Alvador Road turns east, roughly milepost 661. Another section of the right-of-way can be discerned from the landscape where the line once crossed over a waterway before crossing the Long Tom River. The approaches to what would have been a trestle are covered in trees as the line heads straight for the next timetabled station. After crossing the Long Tom River, the line enters the community of Cheshire, crossing Highway 36, where Long Tom Drive and Applegate Trail intersect with the highway. Platted in 1913, Cheshire's creation coincided with the arrival of the line as it passed through on its way to Monroe to connect with the Corvallis and Ulster River Railway. Initially, the community was named Huber, but was changed after it was deemed too similar to another station further north called Huber. Like Alvador, it would get its own post office in 1914. In 1935, Cheshire would become the new southern terminus, when the Southern Pacific filed for abandonment of the 11 miles from here to transfer. This was the shortest-lived section of the West Side branch, lasting just 23 years. Consequently, the electric trolley system in Eugene had ended 9 years prior, when all services were converted to buses. We continue northward following the line as it weaves its way the next 9 miles to the town of Monroe. Its path is evident from above, made all the more apparent by the vegetation that now occupies its engineered surface. There were 2 timetabled locations on the way to Monroe, Bear Creek and Ferguson, located at milepost 664.5 and 666.9 respectively, and were both named after creeks that the line crossed over. Just north of Ferguson Creek, the line crosses Territorial Highway before continuing through more farmland. Today, much of this section is now used by the landowners for access to their neighboring fields, the man-made path standing out against the natural lines of the surrounding landscape. Leaving Lane County, we enter Benton County as we arrive in the town of Monroe at milepost 671.7. Located halfway between the cities of Eugene and Corvallis, Monroe was once one of the largest cities in Oregon. The town's founding was the result of two smaller towns, White's Mill and Star Point, both founded in 1853, combining in 1857. Soon after this, the town became a center for paddleboat traffic, which combined with the building of Highway 99 West aided to the town's rapid growth. However, as a result of the building of the I-5 interstate to the east, Monroe soon dwindled down to the rural town we see today. Entering in from the south, the West Side branch traversed through the town on what is 6th Street, starting at Monroe's grade school, passing behind the town's main drag to the graded area just opposite the Monroe District High School. In 1957, Kelly Street would become the new southern terminus of the branch, with the 9 miles to Cheshire being abandoned by the Southern Pacific. Beyond this point, the line would last long enough to change ownership once more when the branch was leased to the Willamette and Pacific Railroad in 1993. By the time the Willamette and Pacific took over operations, the only customer left in Monroe was an agricultural business that would take loads of fertilizer. The Hulson Livestock and Feed Company occupies the facility today in what would have been the main rail yard of the town. It was previously home to Wilbur Ellis, and located next to it was the original Southern Pacific Depot by what is now aptly named Depot Street. By 1963, only the freight side of the depot was still standing and had been used by successive owners of the feed store as storage for fertilizer brought in by rail. Amazingly, this depot still survives after being bought by Benton County and incorporated into the new Monroe Community Library, completed in 2013. Located just a stone's throw away next to Highway 99, we can make out the old depot forming the wing of the library that parallels the highway, showing off its distinctive eaves and sliding doors. Continuing on our journey north, we depart Monroe as the line parallels Highway 99, and will continue to do so all the way to Corvallis. Leaving Monroe, the right-of-way is far more distinguished in the landscape due to its more recent abandonment, making it easier to trace. It is at this point that the route leaves the hilly terrain for the far more favorable flat river plains of the Long Tom and Willamette rivers. From here, the line's path to Corvallis is dead straight and practically flat, with grades no greater than 0.1%. The change in terrain also signals our arrival at Alpine and Alpine Junction, located at milepost 673. It was here the Alpine branch, the first of many on the west side, began as it headed west into the coastal ranges. The Corvallis and Ulsey River Railway would build the line from Corvallis south to Monroe not long after its formation by Stephen Carver in 1907, reaching this location in June of 1908. The line would be extended to Monroe in 1910, the year prior to the line's purchase by Alvador Welch's Portland, Eugene, and Eastern. We can clearly see the junction as it was when the line would eventually be abandoned. However, if we look a little closer, we can make a return track on the south side of the junction, outlined by the worked ground on the other side of Alpine Road. For a long time prior, Alpine Junction was a Y, first recorded in the timetables of the Portland, Eugene, and Eastern in 1913. A siding was situated within the Y, feeding off each leg of the Y paralleling the main line. The Y would have mainly been used for the turning of steam locomotives and the siding for the passing of trains. After the closures of the track south of Monroe in 1957, these features would become redundant, as only one train would operate the line at any time. Alongside this, dieselization was in full swing, resulting in no more need to Y power with the removal of steam power from the line. This culminated in the removal of the south leg of the Y by 1960, but the siding would remain until the line's ultimate end, 54 years later, seeing continued use. Of noted interest is that here in the southern part of Benton County, this region has been termed the Christmas tree capital of the world. Indeed, the area around here is host to many Christmas tree farms that supply vast amounts of trees every wintertime to the United States, which are shipped out by rail. One such outfit would load cars here at Alpine Junction on the southern part of the siding, taking reefer cars and later boxcars. Diverting from the main line, we follow the Alpine branch as it parallels Alpine Road for a short ways. As we do, we hug to the base of the promontory between us and Monroe. After reaching Alpine Junction, the Corvallis and Ulster River Railway would continue to build another 6 miles westward to reach Glenbrook a year later. The ultimate goal was to reach the Pacific Ocean at Waldport, via the town of Alsea on the other side of the coastal ranges, and follow the Alsea River. However, due to the Panic of 1909, the funding for this planned extension was never obtained, and Carver would ultimately sell to Alvador Welch in 1911, with the system becoming part of the Portland, Eugene, and Eastern. Continuing on, the line pulls away from the road and heads into the fields. Where the line straightens up, the trees thin out, revealing a small bridge hidden in the undergrowth. There are many such bridges that still stand on the last section of the southern west side line to be abandoned, as we will soon see. Leaving the bridge behind, we press on westward. At McFarland Road, the right-of-way is still clear to make out. Here we find a small timber structure that once carried the line over this field drain. A few hundred feet away, we reach the location of what was Bailey Junction. Here the Alpine branch continues due west, with the Bell Fountain branch curving to the north, which we will return to in a bit. Leaving the junction, we lose sight of the right-of-way, but pick it up again a little further on, where its legacy can be seen in the property boundaries. Looking down Alpine Road, we can clearly see the rise and fall of where the right-of-way would have crossed over. Just beyond is the small town of Alpine, and from above we can trace the path of the branch as it passes by the town's southern edge, where the depot would have been located. Alpine is said to have been named in response to the hills in the surrounding area, and after a school of the same name that existed in the area prior to the founding of the town. The town would burn down 3 times over the course of its existence, leaving little in the way of historic structures. One does remain, though, in the form of the Alpine Tavern, built in 1936. From Alpine to Glenbrook, the line begins to climb steeply as it follows Hammer Creek, with grades in excess of 2%. Within a few miles, we soon reach the site of what was the Glenbrook Lumber Mill and nearby community. There is little trace of either having existed except for the log pond, which can still be made out at the south end of the site. The mill was constructed by the Alsea River Lumber Company in 1920, along with 6 miles of logging lines, having the reported capability to produce 50 million board feet of lumber annually. Soon coming under financial trouble, it would pass hands a couple more times before all operations ceased here in the 1940s, with the Southern Pacific filing for abandonment of the Alpine branch from Bailey Junction to Glenbrook in 1951. Returning to Bailey Junction, we now quickly look at what was known as the Bell Fountain branch. From the junction, the line turned north and crossed over the Muddy Creek on another small timber trestle nestled in the trees. The line is clearly defined for us as it cuts through the surrounding fields, all the time ascending. Here, trains would climb a 2.2% grade for the first mile and a half before the grade eases to a mere 1.97% over the remaining 4.5 miles. After not being able to receive further funding to extend the line from Glenbrook, the Corvallis and Alsea would finish off by extending the line to Monroe and building this branch from Bailey Junction to Dawson in 1910. As a result of the abandonment of the line to Glenbrook, this line became known as the Bailey Branch, all the way until its final abandonment in 2007. In Southern Pacific days, crews would gain authority onto this section of line via the use of a solitary staff. Upon arrival at the junction from Corvallis, the brakeman would retrieve the staff and a stack of waybills for cars released at the Hollows Mill from a box that was located next to the junction. As there was only one staff at any one time, whoever had possession of it held authority to traverse the line beyond the junction. Nearing Bell Fountain Road, another surviving trestle appears as the line bends to the west towards Dawson. From the ground, the trestle is still visible above the windblown grass, and where the line crossed Bell Fountain Road is still evident today. Located half a mile north of here lies the small town of Bell Fountain, from which the branch derives its initial name, situated on the intersection of Dawson and Bell Fountain Roads. Originally known as Dusty, the town is thought to have derived its current name from either a town in Ohio or from a nearby spring known as Bell Fountain. Today the stores have all gone, but the community church is still here, as is the local high school. In 1937, the basketball team from Bell Fountain High School would win the state championships in a setup that would be worthy of any Hollywood film. With only 27 students at the time and a team of 8 players, they would make their way to the finals and defeat Lincoln High School, one of the oldest schools west of the Mississippi, by 14 points, making it the closest game played by the Bell Fountain team. A classic tale of small-town heroes, if ever there was one. Where it crossed over Olive Creek, followed by Foster Road. For the rest of the way, our route follows Oliver Creek up the valley floor and is soon joined by Dawson Road. Alongside Dawson Road, we can spot the ballast of the right-of-way, resisting nature's urge to overcome it. Just before Dawson and the mill, 2 larger trestles still stand hidden in the trees, having once carried the line twice more over Oliver Creek. We have now reached Dawson, just as the trains would have done decades prior. It is worth noting that the trains have always been required to shove to Dawson, as there is no means for a locomotive to run around its train here. For this reason, crews would be required to run around their cars at Alpine Junction and then proceed to shove their train the 7 miles up to Dawson. In the last years of operation under the Portland and Western, crews would shove all the way from Corvallis after the removal of the siding at Alpine Junction. Firmly located in the foothills, we find at Dawson the Hall Oaks Lumber Mill, nestled in the valley, created by the confluence of Oliver and Miller Creeks. This mill was not the original purpose for the building of the line, as that would not come until later. Instead of finished lumber, it was built to carry raw logs. The same year that the line was completed by the Corvallis and Alsea River Railway, the Corvallis Lumber Manufacturing Company would be incorporated and would build logging lines from Dawson following Oliver Creek. Lasting several decades, the company would reorganize to the Corvallis Logging Company in 1920 and cease operations in 1939, with a final total of 20 miles of tracks, reaching as far as Flat Mountain. When in operation, trains of loaded logs would be interchanged to the Southern Pacific in a small yard just over a mile northwest of Dawson for haulage to the company's mill in Corvallis. Dawson itself was first noted on early timetables and promotional maps as McCready. The site today consists of a log pond, sawmill, sorting and drying buildings, including a still standing wigwam synonymous with mills of the Pacific Northwest. There has been a sawmill here since 1917, but the operation we see today finds its beginnings in 1936, when Ralph Hull leased the mill site from his cousin, Wes Miller, after the first mill burned down, building a new mill in its place. In 1955, Hull would team up with local longtime logger Chester Oakes, who was also his brother-in-law, giving the Hull Oaks Lumber Company its name. The mill site still operates today, employing 65 people, and is managed by Ralph Hull's grandson. The mill would become famous for being the last mill in the United States to use steam power. This would last all the way until 2013, when everything was fully switched over to electricity. The steam engines powered by sawdust and associated equipment are still in place in readiness but remain dormant due to the simple fact that they require a great deal of upkeep. When rail served the mill, it would load gondolas with wood chips to be turned into paper, and carloads of processed lumber sourced from the hills and valleys around the mill. Today, these loads are trucked to Junction City, where they are loaded onto rail cars at a transload located there. The mill today is also known for their specialty ability to produce large timbers, with no knots in them, for use as ship mast and bridge supports. Lumber produced here has been used in the restoration work on the USS Constitution and the schooner C.A. Thayer, as well as providing lumber for the life-size replica of Noah's Ark at the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. Where the railroad would enter the mill property, the rails are still in situ and can be seen running toward the mill, where the line would split into 3 spurs. 2 of the spurs are still visible where they pass over Oliver Creek to where wood chip gondolas would have been loaded. A new loader stands over them now, where wood chips are today loaded into trailers for transportation by road. Returning to Alpine Junction, we continue our journey north. From here, there are several flag stops along this section of line, with only one depot being at a location known as Greenberry. Just north of the junction, we come upon seed producer and longtime customer of the branch, Garacki Seed. The Garacki family has been farming the valley for generations and was served by the railroad here at their cleaning and packing plant. There was no spur here, however, with cars being spotted on the main, hoppers for bulk seed and boxcars for bag seed. The Garackis continue growing seed crops year on year, with the finished seed now shipped by road. Just north of the Garacki plant, the line crosses Dawson Road, close to milepost 675, at a location referred to as Burnett. Not much is recorded about this location, but we do find a surviving telegraph pole, and more poignantly, a pile of what was the rail for this line having been collected by a salvage firm. 2007 would bring the end of operations over this section with an embargo by the Willamette and Pacific on the Bailey branch, due mainly in part to the poor condition of the line paired with insufficient business to warrant costly maintenance. 2011 would see the Willamette and Pacific and the Union Pacific, who owned the line and leased it to the WP, file for abandonment of the 17.28 miles of track south of milepost 683. An agreement would be struck with Benton County in 2014, and the Union Pacific would hand ownership of the right-of-way for use as a future walkway. When still in operation, particularly in the summer and autumn months, there were several customers along the branch that would have cars spotted on the main line to be loaded with seed. Crews would have to build their train accordingly before leaving Corvallis with spot cars on the head end. As they headed down, they would gather the cars on the main and shove them to clear of Alpine Junction. Once there, they would take the cars for the mill and shove up to Dawson. Upon their return, they would put the spot cars on the bottom of the train and spot them on the main as they returned to Corvallis. After miles of fields and crossing several roads, we arrive at Greenberry. Here, the Corvallis and Alsea River Railway had a depot, and indeed, there are still concrete footings of a later structure that was once here too. The site was named for Greenberry Smith, a pioneer who arrived in 1846 from Virginia with the Meek Party and would come to settle in the area around here. A few hundred yards away on Highway 99, the Greenberry Tavern stands along with the historic Grange, still serving the local community. For the last 5 miles to Corvallis, the track is owned by Venel Farms, whose land surrounds their loading facility we see here at Llewellyn Road. Venel Farms would buy the track in 2010 to ensure rail service to their newly built facility and contracted the Albany and Eastern Railroad to service it. The Albany and Eastern keep a single unit out here with a crew coming out on an as-needed basis to switch what is now a nutrient ag facility and bring cars to and from Corvallis, where they are interchanged with the Portland and Western Railroad. We leave summer behind and embrace a cold, wet, and windy autumn day as we look on from Llewellyn Road. We manage to catch Albany and Eastern's elusive Corvallis job in action. Today, the crew pulls cars released by the Nutrient Ag facility that are to be interchanged with the Portland and Western in Corvallis. With the cars placed in the now disused Venel Farm offloading track, the crew runs around them before proceeding north. The Albany and Eastern is the only short line in Oregon to operate General Electric road power in the form of one C40-8 and 5 B40-8s, the latter of which we find working here in the form of the A&E's number 5931. Its 4,000 horsepower rating more than enough for today's work. With the A&E heading north, we follow behind. As we do, we pass by Corvallis Airport, which was built by the U.S. Army Air Force during World War II for bomber training. The site today sees active use with the airport's original water tower and hangar still standing. Traveling alongside the airport, we pass the small 2,600-foot siding noted as Dry Creek. The line then crosses over Airport Drive before passing by several industries on the west side of the right-of-way. The largest of these is Western Pulp Products that was once served by rail, made evident by the remnants of the lead heading into the facility from the north end. Returning to autumn, we catch the A&E crew as they pass by Dry Creek and the airport. A couple miles from Corvallis Airport, we enter the southern suburbs of Corvallis at milepost 687. Standing at Wake Robin Avenue, we spot an old warehouse that shows signs it once received rail service. 5931 passes through as the rain falls, just another day on the quiet southern end of the West Side branch. A mile further, we find Orchard Siding at milepost 688. Not noted on timetables, this siding is where the Portland and Western's Corvallis local interchanges cars with the Albany and Eastern's Corvallis job. Today, however, the A&E's crew will bring them into Corvallis proper. At the north end of the siding is Avery Avenue, and on the other side of the road we find the remains of an industrial spur that dates from the time of the Corvallis and Alsea River Railway. Deriving the name of Fisher Spur from the original landowner, an August W. Fisher, it was most likely built to serve the Corvallis flour mill that was located next to the Willamette River. Over the years, many other stub tracks would branch off the Fisher Spur to serve other industries. By the time the Willamette and Pacific took over operations in 1993, crews referred to it as the Battery Separator Spur, as by this time, Evanite Battery Separator Incorporated was the only customer that remained. The spur would see its last rail cars in 2005, with the tracks being torn up by 2009. Going over to the other side of the track from the spur is Avery Park, and standing within sight of the rails is the Georgia Pacific Mikado No. 5. Built in 1922 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, No. 5 would see work in Bend and Portland, Oregon, before being bought by the Georgia Pacific in 1956. The locomotive would see only 3 years of service before being donated to the city of Corvallis in 1960 and remained here ever since. Though it never turned a wheel in anger on the west side, it does invoke the memory that at one time the air was full of the sound of iron horses plying their trade up and down the valley. Passing Avery Park, the line crosses over Mary's River on a combination timber trestle and steel girder bridge. We then pass Pioneer Park, then under Highway 20 while we arrive at Corvallis Yard, and indeed Corvallis itself. This was where the Corvallis and Alsea River Railway had its base of operations. The layout of the yard is still much the same as it was 100 years ago, with the main features missing being a series of spurs on the east side, along with the turntable and locomotive servicing area on the southwest side of the yard, where there are now apartments. Today, the yard is used by the Portland and Western's Corvallis local, and is where the Alpine Eastern's Corvallis job will at times bring their cars for interchanging with the Portland and Western. We catch the Alpine Eastern's Corvallis job at the end of their run, having just dropped off their cars and are preparing to return back to Llewellyn Road Light Power. Corvallis marks the end of the first leg of our journey over the West Side Branch. Much of the southern end will never see rails over it again, but there is talk of rebuilding the line to Dawson, of which only time will tell. The Alpine and Eastern have also been expanding their customer base on the remaining section of the line, which may provide future growth for the branch. In the meantime, though, we certainly hope that you've enjoyed joining us as we followed the traces left behind by these early railroad pioneers. We will return in part 2 as we come back to Corvallis and carry on northward on the Portland and Western Railroad's West Side District. Until then, be sure to subscribe for more explorations of abandoned rails in Oregon and other content to come. From all of us at Sidetracked, thank you.